Welcome back to Film Fanatics, where we talk about the movies that have us obsessed, excited, and inspired. I'm Gal.
And I'm Alan. So today we have a very special interview with someone who loves movies as insanely as we do, actually. And then we'll be reviewing one of the most family-centric movies of the year. Yes, I am unfortunately talking about Fast X.
All right, so we'd like to welcome to the show a very special guest. Our guest today is a film fanatic and content creator who's run the popular YouTube channel Sean Chandler Talks About since 2016. And according to one of his famous shirts, he talks movies too much. He's racked up 245,000 subscribers on his main channel, where he ranks movies, franchises, characters, and directors, and reviews the latest of film, TV, and news. Let's welcome to the show, Sean Chandler.
Welcome, Sean.
Hey! Thanks so much for having me.
We're really excited to be talking to you. I've been a follower of your channel, and we've had some friends in the movie world that have also had you on and talked, and we're really glad to have you on Film Fanatics.
I'm excited
what he said.
to be here.
Thank you so much for coming, Sean. So, Gal, do you want me to start the interview, Sean?
Yeah, we have some questions about your process, your channel, your space in which you grow your passion, your excitement of watching and sharing about movies, and so on. So we have some questions for you.
And don't worry, then we'll talk about the best movie of the year. So hold your horses for that one. Okay, so first of all, we wanted to talk to you about what was the moment that you realized you wanted to surround yourself with movies and TV and
Not really. There's not really a moment that kind of defined oh, I'm a movie person now. Oh, I love pop culture. It really was just kind of the way that my life just evolved. Yeah, I think of some of my earliest distinct memories when I was 7 years old. My family had moved from California to Texas, and this was summer '89, was the summer after we moved, and we did a road trip back to California, and we just stopped at a theater in the middle of nowhere that had a balcony and everything, watched Star Trek V. And that same summer is the summer that Batman '89 came out, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and I just remember that's the stuff that my childhood was just kind of like. Those are those distinct memories, and it all goes back to movies, pop culture, and then we were a big Star Trek family during the 90s. My sister and I rode our bikes to the comic store that was several miles away, and so it's just that's just what we did. I don't even know who got us into Star Trek. I don't know. Was it my sister? Was it my mother? I don't really know. I just remember that was a thing that very early on was just kind of there, and by the time I was in high school, started to form some of my own flavor and taste for things. And Jackie Chan was starting to transition over to Hollywood, and they dubbed his movies into English, his Hong Kong films into English. And so I was like, who is this guy? And it was this brand new flavor of action with these long takes and the actors doing these insane stunts. And I was like, this is so cool. And so got super into Jackie Chan, was always into Star Wars. And so in the late 90s, I had a Jackie Chan fan webpage. I was doing some stuff with Star Wars on the internet. So there wasn't a moment. It's just kind of always there. And then it evolved. And then finally my little hobby, clicked and turned into something more than that.
Oh, sure. First, actually, I was thinking when you said, "Oh, there's not really a moment," I was like, "Oh God, the censor's not going to go anywhere." But then you just answered exactly.
You said the best thing.
Exactly
no, there's not a moment.
What you said about Jackie Chan is kind of what John Wick and The Matrix did for me. The Keanu was that for my generation.
Right. And you think through what are those movies where you just see this thing. You've seen hundreds of movies. You've seen thousands of movies. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, that was so fun. That was so fresh. I haven't seen it like that before. And it just opens your eyes to everything you can do with movies.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Actually, like you said about Batman '89, I think that's actually what Begins was for me. When I was 10-ish, I think, 11, 12, I have no idea. That's when that movie hit the screens, and it was one of the first movies I went to see, and it completely changed everything, I guess. But I didn't notice that it changed anything.
Right.
It was just after that. It was just
a start.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you kind of discover this new thing, and in the moment you're just watching a cool movie, but you look back and you go, that was it. That was the thing right there where everything changed. And it's neat the way that works, and you don't, as all the great moments in life, you don't know that they're the great moments in your life a lot of times when they're happening.
Till they become memories.
Exactly.
One of the things that I think really stands out about your channel that I really enjoy is that you involve your family. Like you post about going to the movies with your kids, or one of my favorite rankings that you did was you ranked your wife's favorite movies and then she ranked yours. What is it like to be able to share your job and your passion with your family? What special experiences come out of that, or sharing your childhood favorites with your kids now? Talk a bit more about that.
Sometimes a lot of it's just kind of the extension of who I am, where I started the channel just because I say it all the time. It's the simplified version that I was talking way too much, so I started my channel. But that's kind of who I am. That's just what I gravitate towards and I get excited about, and the things that we're excited about we want to share with people. And so then when you have kids, you want to share what you love with them. And luckily what I'm into is very accessible for children. And so it translates pretty well. But actually a big helper for me in trying to get my kids into the things I'm into is Fortnite, of all things. Because Fortnite knows the kids don't have money, but their parents do. So they do all these crossover events, and they've brought in like Terminators, Xenomorphs, and all these things that because my kids play Fortnite, they're like, oh yeah, Ripley did this and the Xenomorph did this. Like, what? You're 8. Why do you know what a xenomorph is? Oh, because in Fortnite they did this. Oh, well, thanks for doing me a solid, Fortnite. Now I don't have to convince them to be into Aliens and Terminator. You already got them into it just by bringing the skins over.
I'm pretty sure John Wick's like a permanent character there.
Oh, yeah. Well, with this latest chapter, they changed the island, and on the previous 2 islands, they had John Wick's house. So that was my kids' point of reference, is like, oh, that's John Wick's house. How do you know what John Wick's house is? What are you talking about? But so they know all this stuff about John Wick. They know what he looks like and everything. But they changed the island this season, so that's gone. That's not in the case anymore. But yeah, I mean, it's cool that what I do for a living is also my hobby, and it's something that my kids can join in on. And that was always one of the things with the channel that I kind of wanted was that could make me distinct is me. Well, who am I? I love movies and I'm a family person. So then that flavor, I always wanted it to be a part of it. And I would have my wife on a lot more. I would do a lot more with my wife, but she just doesn't like to be on camera. So there's just been a couple things where she's like, I could do that. I'd be interested in that. The kids, they're much more interested in coming on to do videos and everything like that. But they're also young. They're not. The amount to it, how much they can say about a movie that's interesting and useful for people is much smaller than perhaps when they're older.
I don't think I could when I was 8.
There's a lot of coaching going on. All right, I'll talk to them for a while and for several minutes, and for 5 minutes of talking, they'll say like 3 sentences, and I go, "That's the sentence right there. That's it. Okay." And we do several takes of them, and they say their opinion wrong. Like, no, what your opinion is what I heard you say it before, son. As we work through it, and like that's the one right there. And then so there's a lot of coaching a lot of times on some of these things to get them to say the sentence, but it's always talk through it and figure out what did pop out in their minds and try and help them find the way to say what they're feeling in a way that's concise, that's insightful, but that it's not me feeding them lines. It's me trying to find their opinion in their very long set of things they say that it doesn't pop quite yet. So in theory, I'm helping guide them to be young movie reviewers at a young age.
It's kind of like filtering and ordering your train of thought, basically.
Exactly, that's what it is. And that's what with anyone you can do that. Everyone has interesting thoughts about movies. If you talk long enough, you just don't know how to find them, or maybe you're not the quickest to say them as the first thought. But everyone has a feeling, a thought that's interesting, that's useful, a perspective. So if you sit down long enough with someone that can the patience to pluck out the great stuff, everyone has something worth sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't wait to indoctrinate my kids into loving Star Wars. Like that's honestly one of my dreams.
Now, of course, the tricky part though is you might indoctrinate them into your dreams, but they'll pick up a lot of times on the wrong things. So, like with Star Wars, my son is super into Spider-Man 3 because he's into the Bully Maguire dance. And it's like, oh no, you literally picked like the worst thing in all of these movies as your favorite thing because it's silly and he's young. And so he locked onto that one. He loves Venom because Venom's immature and is an alien. So he loves that. And then like with Star Wars, anything with a helmet, he loves.
You're telling me he's gonna like
When he hits his head on the helmet.
You're telling me he's gonna end up liking like Attack of the Clones or something?
I was going to say that.
Attack of the Clones is my son's favorite Star Wars. No, Attack of the Clones and Rise of Skywalker. Those are his two. The two worst ones. And he locked in them. But the reasoning is simple. He likes characters with helmets. He likes things with guys flipping around. And so make a movie that's all about people with helmets. He loves it. And then... And then Rise of Skywalker, that's the first one he remembers seeing in the theater. Now, I'm sure, when he gets to 13, it'll change, and then he's 18, it'll change again, and then it'll slightly adjust, as he moves into mature adulthood. But, it's fun that when they start to pick up on the things that you like, but they don't like it the same way that you like it. And you make... That's the hardest thing for me is... wanting to share my passion, but also wanting to give them that freedom to discover your own thing. Back to Fortnite, my a big thing, an interesting thing over the last 6 months or so is that my kids are really getting into anime. Dragon Ball Z was on ramp, and then Attack on Titan, Naruto. They're not really on Naruto yet, but they're like getting there. They were starting to get an Attack on Titan as much as we'll let them watch it. All of that came from Fortnite. They did a big, gigantic Dragon Ball Z crossover 6 months ago with Kamehamehas and stuff like that. I've never watched Dragon Ball Z. I don't know anything about it. I'm not introducing my kid to it, but it was in Fortnite. And they had one episode free in the Fortnite app. And so my son started watching that. I was like, okay. And he comes up to me one day, he goes, hey, can we get a subscription to Crunchyroll? Why do you even know what Crunchyroll is? You're 10 years old. Why do you know what that is? He goes, well, because there's more Dragon Ball Z on there. It's like, there's Dragon Ball Z on Hulu. You've got Hulu already. Just check it out. And so he's become obsessed with Dragon Ball Z. And then they started to do a new Attack on Titan one. So he's getting into that. And none of that comes from me. Fortnite exposed him to this popular culture, a vein of culture that has nothing to do with me. And that's really fun. Because it is their continuation of my love for popular culture and nerdy things, but it's not my version of it. It's their version of it. And that's fun. And hopefully it's going to bring me, like, I'm not into anime. I don't know much about anime, and people have been recommending anime to me for as long as I've had a channel and an audience. And now it's my kids that are actually making that something I'm getting pulled into.
So I wanted to ask another thing. You've branched off to your channel, Sean Chandler Plus, which also has a couple thousand followers. And I guess you could describe it better probably, but it's like smaller scale or like nicher titled videos in a way. But you also have your Patreon, which you say is your inner circle. What made you want to make those brands of content, like distinguish between them?
Well, Patreon is simple. I wanted an additional revenue stream. so it's a way to make more money. And both of those things, it took me a long time to figure out what can I do? Like, what's the unique value? Because with anything you do, whether a podcast, YouTube channel, if you want it to grow, you have to offer value. You have to have something there that's actually not just serving me. Well, I want Patreon so I can make money. I don't want a tip jar. I want to create an additional service that provides value. And so it took me several years to really figure out how can I do that with Patreon that just doesn't become a second studio producing a ton of content. And so like with Patreon, what I realized was when my channel took off, I've got tens of thousands, now hundreds of thousands of subscribers. If I do a live stream, if it's a bad one with no one in it, there's 100 people. 100 people's a bad one. sometimes it's 500, sometimes I've had like 1,000 in them. So you can't ever answer everybody's questions. So there's only so much access people can have to me. I can't go in the comment section all that much because I've reached the size where people leave a comment, they don't think I'm actually going to read it. And so then they write the meanest version or the angriest or the harshest version. And so then Patreon is a place where it's a club. It's the live streams have 10, the one this week, it was one of the biggest ones I've had, where it's like 30 people for a little while. And 30's, like, wow, 30 people are in here. That was a big number. And that means I can interact with everyone. I can get to know everyone. And they can feel like they're having a back and forth a little bit more. And it's kind of that. That's what the idea of Patreon was. I can provide a little bit more access to me to interact with people. And then on the top tier, I do like the video chat. So there's people I talk to like this every month with. And so we actually know each other really well. And like, all right, let's talk about this next month. It's cool. It's like, gets back to the root of why I started all of this. But it's like, how do you add value? How can you do something that's a new way to connect with people? And then same with Sean Chandler Plus. A lot of that goes back to kind of YouTube strategy and trying to figure out how the algorithm works. But my channel grew because I'm doing these big franchise rankings. But I don't only want to cover big franchises, and big franchises aren't all that comes out. And so I just wanted a place to where I could talk about something without fearing that it'll jack up the algorithm or confuse the algorithm. So, like this month, if I put out my ranking for the Marvel movies after Guardians of the Galaxy 3, pretty safe bet it'll get 50,000 views, or really pretty safe to get 100,000, and it did. But I put out a review of something like Sisu from last month. It's going to get under 10,000 views. I want to talk about Sisu because it's not the thing everybody knows about. It's a Finnish action movie. That's not nearly as high of exposure as, Guardians 3, Marvel, Disney. So I put that on my main channel, and it got something like 7,000 views, and it makes my videos spread out less. And so if I put that on a second channel, then it just kind of provides a place for me to talk about it and do things like that. So that's kind of the strategy of like, what the videos that I want to talk about it. This is the thing I'm interested in, but that I don't want to compromise how much these bigger videos will do. That was the starting point. But where it's really found its stride over the last year is whenever I do live streams, whether on Patreon, when I even join in on something like this, if I discuss a topic that's interesting, which is a lot of it's movie news, it's editorial, it's opinion-based things, I clip those out and make them videos over there. So I'm talking about way more topics, and without needing to do a ton of complex editing, without needing to do a second recording session. And because they're live streams, my personality comes out a lot more. It's a lot more of me than when I do, my Fast and the Furious ranking that'll drop today in the day that we're recording this. Like that one, I had all these notes. I'm trying to say everything in a certain amount of time. It's like the certain rigidness to it versus I'm just talking about a topic. Something set me up, and I'm just going for it, talking about it. And that's kind of the big idea there. So main channel, you're going to get these slickly edited, mostly mainstream, big franchises, high profile. Second channel, the idea of having something that's a little bit more personal, live streams, more niche, things that maybe aren't going to be as popular, but I still want to talk about it. And then Patreon, the idea is access. It's just much more of a smaller community where we can get to know each other.
To build on that, are there any interactions that you've had with your Patreon fans or with other movie fans at the fan expos that you go to that have stuck out?
I mean, just the general pattern is what stands out, and that's to say that whenever I go to these, they're only the friendliest, kindest people. Whenever I do Patreon video chats, it's just people like me that love movies way too much. And it just sticks out every time. Because every day I go on Twitter and there's some psycho that's mad at me for something that's not real. Like they've made up a narrative and they're angry with me over that narrative. I go in the comment section and there's someone yelling at me because I've got Tokyo Drift at the bottom of my Fast and the Furious ranking. Like, my whole channel's built around, hey, my list isn't the right list. It's just my list. I'd love to see yours. And then How dare you? This movie belongs in first place. Well, okay, it's first on your list, but it's not on mine. Do you want me to lie to you? And just like that's what the comment section is. And every time I go to a fan expo, there's so many people. They're just excited to see me, excited to talk movies with me, take a picture. And another big one that happens at the fan expos is that like a 15-year-old kid runs up to me and wants to talk about what I think is going to happen in Kang Dynasty. They want to take a picture, and then their parent pulls me aside and thanks me for being a good role model, being a YouTuber that doesn't drive them crazy, that they can play in their living room and the whole family can watch, or certain rankings, certain reviews. They're like, yeah, our whole family watches this. And just because I've kind of shared my past struggles in life, where I struggled with alcohol, and I've been pretty open about that on my channel, because I do that, they thank me. And a lot of times it's I struggled with that, my husband, my wife struggled with that, and having a role model, someone that is doing well and talking openly about their faults, but also showing that our faults don't define us, they thank me for that all the time. And like even with like the Patreon video chats, there was one last summer. I was in Denver for Denver Fan Expo, and one of my patrons lives out in Denver. And I was like, "Hey man, don't you live in Denver?" He's like, "Yeah, I live in Denver. I'm going to be there. Instead of doing a video chat, why don't we meet up at Chick-fil-A?" And so I just met up in person with him, and we like hung out for 2 hours talking movies. So it's what. Well, he's on Patreon, so he's a guy that I video chatted with him before. So it wasn't like I knew who the guy was. We interacted multiple times over video chat, but it wasn't like random guy like, hey, let's meet. Like, you just don't know, you don't know what you're gonna get with that. But this guy I talked to before, and I was like, absolutely, let's meet up in person and just talk. And so that's what we did. We met up at Chick-fil-A. And we talked and for like 2 hours, and it was cool. And so that's more the vibe. It's not like. There's not like a specific one that stands out. It's just this general vibe of this is why I do this. This is because it's just these normal, happy interactions. You guys are you've been on YouTube. You know how crazy, toxic, weird everything is. I'm even thinking like today I have to shoot my review for The Little Mermaid, and I'm kind of dreading it because no matter what I say, whichever direction I go, someone's gonna be mad at me. You're a woke idiot. You're a racist. Like, it's going to be what one side or the other is going to be mad at me, whatever I say about this movie. And there's also the potential that both sides will be mad at me over this movie because the internet is so weird.
I think that's what probably is going to happen.
Exactly. It's just like, but every time I talk to you guys, every time I talk to someone on Patreon, every time I meet people at fan expos, it's none of the crazy. They're just normal conversations that people that, the internet, the anonymity, the barrier of technology brings out the wacky.
So actually it's good that you brought up The Little Mermaid, because I wanted to ask something along the lines of like the movies that you like or that you don't like as much as anymore. Because I feel like ever since we started doing this like 2-3 years ago, something like that, my taste in movies changed like dramatically. Like I used to be way more into like the big budget like Marvel stuff and all that, and now like I adore going to like these really like small movies and stuff for like Oscars, but not even that, and like international movies and all that. So I wanted to know what was your journey like in that sense, because I'm sure you also probably got like overstuffed with all these big movies, and if that change happened to you as well.
Yeah, I think that's anyone that gets really into movies. I think that's a journey that you kind of go on, and there's ups and downs and backs and forths and all of it. But there's normally some entry franchise that's very mainstream that makes you go, oh, movies are cool and fun. And you start getting into them. And then eventually a friend shows you something, you see a trailer and go, that's kind of interesting, you go check it out. And it's so different from mainstream. There's a polish, a shine, professionalism to mainstream, but there's a sameness that comes with professionalism and the slickness. There's a vibe to it. And then you see this indie film, this foreign film, and you're introduced to this fresh thing. I like that. That's different. It doesn't taste the same as all this other stuff that's made for the broadest possible audience at the time of that movie's release. And so then you get into it and you start going down that rabbit hole and discover all this cool stuff. And then other phases of life, even as you get older and beyond that, you want the mainstream, easy to digest films. Different phases of life, you need and want different things. So yeah, for like me, like I said, I was always kind of into pop culture, movies, things like that. So throughout the '90s, a lot of Star Trek, anything real sci-fi, action. I was always into that. Always liked martial arts films, so that's why when I mentioned before Jackie Chan came over, that was one of those journeys for me because it got me into Hong Kong cinema. So a lot of that was, of course, Jackie Chan. Not as much Jet Li because Jet Li did kind of the wire fu, and I'm not as much into that outside of like the Matrix, but I did get into some of it, and then did I say John Woo? That was Jet Li does the wire fu. John Woo with Chow Yun Fat doing a bunch of these heroic bloodshed films, and the Killer, Better Tomorrow, Hard Boiled, and just like wow, these are such exciting action sequences. So that was kind of the first way where I discovered a new thing and went down this path, and it was still action, but it was a brand new flavor, and all of that stuff transitioned over, influenced The Matrix, influenced all kind of action movies throughout the early zeros and late 90s and early zeros. And I was kind of watching those movies from Hong Kong before that happened, before it really took over on the mainstream. I was an early adopter here in the United States. But then around the year 2000, graduate high school, and a friend of mine started inviting me to the indie cinema or the art house theater. And there's like this new movie that played backwards called Memento, from this director. He hadn't done anything big. His previous film only cost $8,000. His name is Christopher Nolan. So, and he takes me, and it was only playing at like 1-2 theaters in town, this small little one. He goes, oh, to blow your mind. Like, it's trippy. So go see it. And I was like, holy cow, the movie played backwards. I didn't know you could do that with a movie. Wow. Whoever this Christopher Nolan is, I think he might be up to something. This guy might have a future in this career.
He might.
Maybe. We'll see what happens.
He's very small still, so let's wait.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And then another movie came out called Made, from like very kind of Tarantino inspired, but with a very different flavor to it at the same time, by some guy named Jon Favreau. And I saw that movie and checked it out. And this Jon Favreau guy, I really like this movie. I bet he'll go off and he'll have a career for himself. And so I just
another very indie guy. Maybe he'll hit it someday. We're rooting for him.
Probably stay there in the indie scene. Probably won't go too mainstream or get too wacky with technology. So we'll see what comes of all of this. And so, but but you think like both of these guys, they put out a little movie that costs under $2 million, $3 million, like way less than $10 million. Little film. In the year 2000-ish. And then from there, they get these bigger projects, and they've become two of the biggest influences. One of them does, in 2008, The Dark Knight. The other one does Iron Man. Both of the same year. And you should stop and think. Like, my formative, when I'm discovering there's movies that aren't mainstream, I discover these two guys, and then they've dominated mainstream culture in these gigantic franchises for the last 15 years. But like there's all these kind of movies. Some of them were people that didn't take off, but I discovered at that point in time. And then it's like Donnie Darko came out, and a bunch of these kind of different films that weren't mainstream. So I had this whole phase where I was into all of that and like discovering Scorsese and watching Taxi Driver, and then bought a book that had all these movies, or read an article with 100 movies that Quentin Tarantino recommended. So started going through the list, checking out all these kind of older films from the 70s. And it was like that. But jump forward, I get married, I have a job that's very stressful. So when I go to the movies and I'm 30 years old and stressed out of my mind, I don't want to go to a complex exploration of the human experience. I want to go see Iron Man punch someone in the face with a metal glove. And then when you have kids, once again, your tastes change a little bit.
No, yeah, I completely understand, because even though I just talked to you about like that experience for me, I feel like I'm going like back to that right now, because I think I maybe went too deep into the other side, and now I just kind of want to like shut off my brain for a little bit. Like you said, I also have like a stressful full-time job. We're like in the final year of university, so like everything is like a bit crazy. So yeah, like when you have like a little bit of time off, why not watch like 8 dudes run their cars through space or some shit?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
It's fun.
I really hope I can keep that balance, because I'm 20 and I like both.
Well, and And there's people, I get this criticism all the time of like, oh, you just watch big mainstream films. First off, that's not true. If all you see is me covering big mainstream films, that's because those are the only videos of mine you're clicking on. That's how the YouTube algorithm works. I'm covering a lot more stuff and smaller things and obscure things and doing videos specifically so I can cover smaller things and go to like Fantastic Fest where I'll watch 20 movies in a week in the theater, and half of them won't even be released in theaters. They're just that small, that indie, and they're there to get distribution. But what people see is just the side of things that kind of drives my channel, and they define me based off of that. And so it's like, oh, all you've ever been is this. You made that story up. You don't know what I was doing in 2003. You weren't even born yet. Like, you don't know what I was doing. You don't know what I was watching even yesterday. But they kind of invent kind of these stories based off of, they just see me ranking the Marvel movies a lot. Why do you only cover comic book movies? I don't know how to respond to that, because I don't. Why do you only watch comic book movies? I don't. That's just false.
Yeah, and people don't really understand, especially in your case, because you do this like full time. Like, people don't really understand that like this is like your job. So like, if you talk about like a small movie, nobody's gonna watch it. And then for that month, you might not get like as much as like you need to live or something like that. And that's something that grown-ups can't really afford.
And so like in the case of my channel for this year, my number one movie of the year right now is Air. The Ben Affleck.
Me too.
It's great. Awesome. A great feel-good movie. Just feel like, we don't have enough of those types of movies being made these days. So I loved it. I saw it in the theater with my neighbor. And that, because like my wife couldn't go to the press screening, and as soon as it dropped on Amazon Prime that night, I was like, you got to watch this, because I was just so excited about it, and she hadn't seen it, so I want to watch it with her. She didn't seem as impressed as I was, but like that was the movie this year. Like, she hasn't seen Creed 3 and some of these other bigger mainstream movies. They're part of franchises that we've, grown up watching together. The first movie that my wife and I saw after we got married, or in the theater, was Rocky Balboa. That was built into our honeymoon plan. I told her we have to go see Rocky Balboa before we go off to the exotic location. That's a real thing that happened. It's like, there's a new Rocky movie. I have to go see it before. She's like, that's cool. And that's how I knew I'd married the right person. But she hasn't seen Creed 3 yet. But I knew I wanted to watch Air. Anyway, where I'm going with this, my review for Air has under 10,000 views. And I understand for a lot of people, 10,000 views, like 7,000, 8,000 views, that's a fantastic number. I don't want to diminish that. But my review for Guardians Volume 3, my second favorite movie of the year, has like 60,000 views. And my ranking has over 100,000 views. Air, 7,000 or 8,000 views. And that's my favorite movie of the year. It stars all of these movie stars that people know, but it's not a big, gigantic mainstream franchise, so it didn't get 10,000 views. And then likewise, when people are like, all you ever do is cover MCU films. Well, when I covered Guardians of the Galaxy, 50,000 on the review, over 100,000 on the ranking. I've got another ranking that's over 50,000. So like, the combined amount of views from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is around 400, 500,000 views. My number of views from the movie Air, 7,000. 2 movies I've watched 2 times. I've watched those movies the same amount of time, but the amount of exposure that people see me talking about them, wildly different. And I wish that my Air review did better. That's the movie that I want to tell people about. That's the movie that's interesting for me to tell them about. I don't need to tell you to go see Guardians of the Galaxy. You already know what it is. You already know if you're interested in seeing it. But Air, you probably don't know if it's good or not. That's more interesting for me to talk about it.
Absolutely. That's what we like to cover as well here. Like, not just when we've watched Fast and Furious, F9, Fast X, etc., but something we've seen on Apple or Netflix that may qualify for the Oscars, etc., or something like hidden gems and so on. With that, we want to move on to a more fun part of the interview. We wanted to ask you some movie-related questions because we're all such movie fanatics here. I wanted to ask, on that subject, you talked a bit about niche movies, less mainstream. What's a movie that you found yourself recommending a lot to your friends, but not as many have seen, but you love it?
So my go-to movie in that regard is the movie Warrior. And so it's almost kind of infamous on my channel of the movie that I've recommended of like, oh, you got to go check out Warrior. But that predates YouTube. I discovered the movie not in the theater. I didn't see it in the theater, but right afterwards I watched it and I went, this movie's incredible. I love this. This movie out Rocky's Rocky. This is awesome. And so like I worked at a church and I was in it like, I don't think it's rated R, but it might be. Like there's at least one F word in there. I would show it to my youth group. I'd show it to my teenagers every year, and it, like just because I thought I like wanted to like, expose them to this movie. This predates YouTube, and that's always my go-to recommendation because it's just it's a movie that's it does what all great sports movies do, which is it's really about the characters and the journey and the fights, the games, the matches are just a visual representation of what's going on the inside of the characters. And the last hour of this movie is just nonstop massive payoff. So that's the one. If you don't know what it is, it's got Tom Hardy, Joel Edgerton, Nick Nolte in it. Frank Grillo's in it. Frank Grillo. This is the movie where I first saw Frank Grillo. Was in this movie, Warrior. So I love that movie. And almost actually coincidentally, I've interviewed one composer in my lifetime, and coincidentally, it was the composer for this film, Mark Isham. And I was interviewing from something completely different. And while doing my research to prep for the interview about this other thing, I was like, Warrior? This guy did Warrior? And so I got to talk with him about scoring the movie. And you know, if you've seen the movie, it like crescendos in the last 3 minutes of the movie, crescendos with a song, and like got to talk with him about what that was and how it's not the studio version, it's a live performance, and how he expanded it and did all this stuff with it. It was really cool.
I actually love Warrior. I saw it also.
You have incredible taste in movies.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Warrior, yes. But it's
a damn good movie.
We did a sports movies episode to coincide with Creed 3. We counted down our top 10 sports movies with each other, and I put Warrior at like number 6 or 7. It's definitely up there for me.
You have chosen wisely. Well, it's a movie that I'm not even sure why it didn't take off, because it's I've recommended it so many times on my channel, and I don't remember, maybe it was when I put out my top 20 movies, something like that, about 4 or 5 years ago, and every single day for 3 months, someone DM'd me, I checked out Warrior, you were right, I loved it. And I still get that very often. Anytime I mention Warrior, people will comment, hey, I watched it because of you and I loved it.
So I'm checking now. Like, It didn't even make all its money back at the box office back in 2011. Nick Nolte got nominated for the Oscar, which is awesome. So at least they knew what they were talking about.
Well, if you want to watch Warrior, I think it's on HBO Max right now. I might be wrong, but I'm 80% sure that's on HBO Max.
I will pull up my app that answers that question.
Because I think that's where I watched it last, and it wasn't a long time ago. It's a very real moment.
My app right now says it is on Cinemax. That's what my app is saying, Cinemax. I don't know how true that is, but usually the app is pretty reliable.
Maybe I used VPN to like Brazil or something for HBO Max, and it was there. Anyway, a different question that I wanted to ask you, kind of actually linking to what we talked about before, about our changes, our how our mood and how we're feeling towards some movies changes over time. Do you have a movie that you really disliked before, or one that you really liked and now you can't stand, or that you love now?
I don't know that I have anything that's love to hate, anything that dramatic. I think my tastes change pretty regularly. I think there's a lot of movies that play great in the theater for me, but then leave no mark afterwards. That's something I really struggle with on my channel, is that I'll go see a movie, have so much fun watching a film, score it based off that, and then a week later I couldn't tell you a thing about the film. And that's the problem. If you love movies, if you love going to the movies, the experience of watching a film with a community of other film lovers, if you watch a movie in a specific environment that's just really cool, If you go see like a Disney live action remake and you can take your daughters to it and they're just loving it, whether that's Belle or and a couple days from now, I'm going to a promo screening and I'm allowed to bring 3 guests. So I'm bringing my 2 daughters and then my daughter's best friend. So I'm going to take 10 girls under the age of 10 to see The Little Mermaid in the theater. Well, that's going to be an awesome experience. It doesn't mean it's going to be an awesome movie. I mean, I've already seen it, so I already know my thoughts on it. But like that's going to be an awesome experience, whether the movie's good or bad. And so I struggle a lot with there's movies that I watch them, and then I do my initial ranking and I put them in one place. Jump forward a year to whatever it is, and I'm doing the updated version of the ranking. Rewatch the film, and I go, I mean, it's fine, but I forgot everything about it. And I mean, the one that's on my mind is F9, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit. A lot of people hated that movie because it was too, because it was too dumb. I for 20 years I've thought these movies are dumb, so I go in just expecting dumb, and I realized I saw it 2 times in the theaters, and that was 2 years ago, and I was like, all I remember is Tarzan. Car in space, and really, John Cena is is Vin Diesel's brother, really, but that's all I can remember about the film. Like, I had fun, but I couldn't remember a single thing about the plot, so I rewatched it, and there's this whole other set of villains in the movie that are working with Jacob, the brother, and I was like, I don't remember any of this.
I have not rewatched it in 2 years, so I would not be able to tell you.
Right, exactly. And so that was for me one where I went, okay, like this played well in the theater because I went to see something dumb and do dumb stuff to put a smile on my face.
First movies, like, quote unquote, after COVID, so I think a lot of people were really excited just to be in the theater.
Yeah.
It was actually the first movie that I think me and Gal watched together in a movie theater because we met each other in COVID. So I think that might have been the first one we watched together, and I think we reviewed it on the
We
on
definitely
the podcast.
reviewed it, and we did a whole like Fast and Furious retrospective. But I agree that sometimes I think the experience of like if it's an anticipated movie, I'm like, okay, this is fun that I'm watching this movie that it's come out. Like, and then later I'm thinking I wouldn't go back to watch that, or the excitement you have that you're watching it doesn't hold up after. Like, I feel like I would be a lot less generous to something like Black Adam or Love and Thunder. You know, Black Adam I dislike. Love and Thunder I think is okay, but I feel like I was excited more to see them in theaters because I had been waiting for them rather than would I revisit this months after.
Well, and I like so, and that's the piece that I think I have a really difficult. I don't think I'm very good at estimating my feelings, how I'll feel about the movie in the future at all. And I mean, another one kind of comes to mind. Because these are the things I've kind of been working on, but like the Lion King 2019, Lion King was my favorite animated film of all time, and the press the press screening for it was at the Bob Bullock IMAX here in Austin, and basically Bob Bullock is this big, gigantic, fancy museum across the street from the University of Texas. So this is a true old school IMAX, insanely large screen that was designed to show these incredible IMAX documentaries. And that's where they did the press screening for The Lion King. And it's the only time that they've done a press screening at that location, at the best screen in Austin. And so in that environment, and I went with a friend who he was leaving the next week to move to LA. And so we go and watch it in this incredible environment. My favorite animated film of all time, huge, gigantic screen. It was cool. And it like the technology was remarkable. And then jump forward. Did I want to take my kids to go see it? No, I did not. Did I want to watch it at home? No, I did not. Is there anything that this thing has to offer for me besides that initial viewing on a gigantic IMAX screen? It does not. So
with the Lion King remake.
I completely agree. I went with my family when it came out. Again, on a huge IMAX screen. And I haven't watched it since 2019. Because, like, at that moment, it was fun. It was amazing, like, being in the theater and, like, you know, like kind of like not really singing along, but like in your head, like singing along to like all the songs, because like that's like it was even my favorite like musical for like the longest time. So like yeah, the experience was actually pretty good, but I have no interest in watching that again.
I think
if
you
I
look
want to
back,
watch The Lion King, I watch the original.
Yeah, because you look back and it's like, it's the same movie. You're like, I was with my grandma. It was nice. Visuals were nice. It was cool. And then I think back, like, why would I rewatch it if you have, it's the original's shorter to the point. It's more charming.
Yeah, and animated animals can emote and photorealistic animals cannot. And so you just kind of immediately go, wow, you did it. What a technological wonder. Okay, cool. Let's move on. It has nothing to offer as a actual sit there and watch the entire movie. There's zero rewatchability factor.
Experience frames it well. It's a museum movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right, perfect.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. I think I talked about this before on this channel, but I had an experience that I watched when Captain Marvel came out. I thought it was amazing because I watched it with my sister. My sister's only like a year younger than me, and it was the first midnight screening I ever went with her, right? Because she doesn't like this stuff as much as I do. But she was like, no, for Captain Marvel, I want to go. And I was like, okay, weird, but okay, I'm into it. And I did, like, when we were there and we were sitting and it started, she said like that she was so excited because it's like a Marvel superhero that's a girl, like that's, that's a woman, and like that we all know that wasn't that as normal before, right? Even in the MCU, it took like 10 years for it to happen, which is kind of crazy if you think about it nowadays. But like just seeing it with her, I think like it kind of gives you that like mirage that like, because the experience was amazing, but not actually the movie. So
I'm actually warmer towards Captain Marvel than most people. It's not a great movie, but it's good.
No, yeah, I still like it enough, but like definitely not as much as when I had that experience.
And I have that a lot with the movies that I take my daughters to. And any movie I would decide to take them specifically to, it plays so much better if you watch it as a family. Because if it's designed for them, if I want to take them to it, I'm 41 years old. Like, it's weird when you're like, hey, super excited to watch a movie designed for 9-year-old girls. But if you watch it as a dad with his daughter, that's a cool moment. And that's even what I like some of the, I have a lot of interactions with, here's one that comes to mind. The movie called Playing with Fire came out like 4 years ago. John Cena, firefighter movie. It's lowbrow. Yeah. It's not like, this is not great cinema. Definitely like play into the lowest common denominator. But it's also overtly for elementary school age children. So I went to go see it with all my kids. And they had a ton of fun with it. My son's biggest complaint was, I thought there was going to be more firefighting in this movie. That was his issue with it. He's like, are they going to do more firefighting? It's like, I don't know, son. I didn't write the movie. I haven't seen it before. But watched it with them, so it's fun. And I go on the internet, and a bunch of 25-year-old dudes went to go see it to review it for their YouTube channel. They're like, this movie sucks. Worst movie of the year. I was like, yeah, right. Like, it's not like the 20% Rotten Tomatoes probably makes sense. This is not in any way great cinema. My kids didn't ask to like rewatch it at home. That should probably tell you also quite a bit. But these people are like, if you're 25-year-old dude trying to dunk on a movie designed for 8-year-olds, right? It wasn't designed to offer you anything at all. It is not trying to offer 25-year-old that's getting into cinema, that discovered that Martin Scorsese and Darren Aronofsky make more interesting films than Playing with Fire. Like, it's not for you. And right.
I think what happened is also a lot of us got like used to like the whole Pixar thing, when it's like, yeah, it's a movie for kids, but everyone loves, and it's like it has deep, it's deep, it has meaning, and all that. And I think people just think that every movie for kids is gonna be like that. Every like 25-year-old dude thinks like that. But that's not really how it works, because first of all, it's super hard to make a movie like that appeals that much to all these different types of people.
And that's why Pixar's so special. Like, that's why they're legendary. That's why their reputation, like the brand Pixar was so strong, and it's softening over the last few years, but there's so much trust there because for over 20 years, they were able to make great family entertainment that every kid loves, and parents thought, that's a really good movie. That's hard to do. It's incredibly difficult, especially to do that for that long. It's a lot easier to make a movie, with John Cena farting in a fire or whatever. Just aim just for kids. It's pretty easy to make a kid laugh. But making it something that's broadly accessible and enjoyable, that's so hard. That's why Pixar's special.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe these 25-year-old dudes need to find something else to do.
And I don't like to just use the argument, well, it's not designed for you. I posted my quick reaction to The Little Mermaid last week, and all these two why is a 41-year-old man watching The Little Mermaid? Because I can. It's my job. I'm a dad. So I don't like to I don't mean to entirely be dismissive with that, but there's a side to it of you have to factor into some degree who the target audience is, that it's definitely not you, that you're watching it in the weirdest way possible. That you're a 25-year-old dude sitting a bunch of kids watching to hate watching Playing with Fire. That's kind of weird. It's an odd thing to do. And I guess maybe some of that, it felt like people looking for an easy thing to dunk on.
Yeah,
this is actually me giving Mario a negative review.
Like some of when you're it's easy to dunk on John Cena fighting fires and farting and a diaper came off in the bubbles or whatever. It's easy to dunk on it. It's easy to use it as a target to roast the movie, and it's fun to roast movies, and it's easier to be funny when you have a movie that's easy to roast. But also, you're 3 times the age of the target audience. And you're watching it not as a dad. You're watching it as a cynical 25-year-old.
Exactly. I will tell you, this is slightly easier if you're not in the U.S. because I'm Brazilian. I grew up in Brazil, and now we live in Israel. So, when we go to watch these movies, it's usually at one of the sessions that is not dubbed. So it's only weird, cynical adults watching it. So that makes it a lot less weird. So yeah, I think that actually wraps up quite nicely our interview part of the show. I think we got to know you a lot better now, Sean. And if you want to learn more about Sean, you can of course go to his channels, to his socials. It's right there somewhere.